One of the things about Pope Benedict is that when he was elected in April of 2005, his first World Youth Day was that summer in Cologne, his native Germany, and the Cologne Cathedral is built around the relics of the Magi. And so that his first World Youth Day, the whole theme was "Come, let us adore him," which we sing obviously at Christmas time. And then this feast was his last major solemn feast before his abdication in February of 2013, because it falls January 6th. So there's a Benedictine connection there.
Yeah, he loved this feast day, very much so. And I remember at Cologne, he had a beautiful comment that he made about the Magi, because he was really into relationship with God, but relationship with between human beings. But he had this beautiful passage where in the scripture it says, and they went home another way. In other words, they had encountered Christ and had recognized that he was the chosen one Messiah, and it changes everything. It wasn't just that they avoided Herod. They went back as changed men as a fruit of that encounter.
And I know for many Catholics around the globe, a lot of them celebrate Epiphany more than they celebrate Christmas Day.
Well, here it's a national holiday. And behind us are likely throughout the day to be a number of celebrations and festivals. You're right. It is, in some ways, too, we're drawing to an end to the Christmas season. And it's, again, marking the continuation of our journey through the Christmas season as we're fortified. But to pick up on something that Dr. O'Donnell said, we want to take this with us on our journey wherever we're returning.
Well, this is the 12th day of Christmas, not the Christmas carol, but the 12th day. And in younger Christian countries like the United States and Canada, it doesn't have the significance. But in older Christian countries, you're right, Catherine, it can be almost an equivalent feast.
12th night.
There's always a debate every year, I feel like, around Christmas. When does Christmas truly end? My husband and I keep our tree up until Candlemas on February 2nd.
Okay,
so
very
that's
good.
just that is our
So you just
opinion.
cruise right past Epiphany. That's just time to
I
water
celebrate
it.
all. It's a both and.
Is it a natural tree?
It is.
Good. Okay. Very
It's
good.
a natural tree.
It is.
So they water it on the Epiphany. That's the watering day. Okay.
Exactly. You know, again, what a week this has been. Yesterday we saw tens of thousands pack St. Peter's Square for the funeral mass of Pope Benedict XVI. A lot of touching moments we can get to. But Dr. O'Donnell, you met Pope Benedict a number of times. Tell us about the first time you met him.
Oh, thank you. Well, the first time we met, I think 27 years ago, we had actually traveled to Rome. My wife, we had a little baby, Kieran, with us at that time. And we had sent him some information on the college. We wanted to meet and introduce the work of the College of Christendom to him. And, you know, all in the press, he was the Panzer Cardinal, this horrible guy at the Holy Office. And we met him, the most gracious, gentle, considerate man. And you could tell thorough. Everything we had sent, he had read, numerous questions, and it began a wonderful relationship and support with the college. He agreed to be the honorary chairman of our 25th anniversary dinner. And since after that, whenever we came to Rome with a group of pilgrims, we would always make a trip to the Holy Office. And then he would celebrate Mass right over here in the Vatican early in the morning. And he would always welcome all the pilgrims, would come and meet with each person individually. But he was really a very sensitive, very gentle, gracious man.
Thank you for those insights. You know, Matthew, as you mentioned with Epiphany, it's this journey towards truth, and that is so much of what Pope Benedict was. He spoke so often about faith and reason. Dr. O'Donnell, can you speak about Pope Benedict's message of faith and reason and why that's so significant for our world today?
Well, it's important to remember that he worked for decades with John Paul. And John Paul selected him to be the head of the commission that gave us the Catechism of the Catholic Church. But that union of faith and reason, Fides et Ratio, was something very deep to John Paul, but also to Benedict. So I think there was a tremendous continuity between those two pontificates. But one of the things that he always was so powerful on with that was the notion of intellectual charity. That, you know, that the truth and communicating the truth in love is the greatest act of charity. We're made for truth. Our minds are made for truth. And our hearts, when we are exposed to the truth, will receive that. And so I think that was something that he tried to communicate in every facet of his life, that notion of intellectual charity. I remember when he came to the United States on a visit, and he summoned it was unprecedented, all of the presidents to gather at Catholic University. And he gave a fabulous talk there, where he led us not just in affirming, he showed out the importance of Catholic education, but asked for a deep, profound examination of conscience. Do we really accept that we only can understand who we are in the light of the mystery of Jesus Christ? Does the faith penetrate and affect every facet of our college community life, sacramentally and in terms of prayer and in terms of the classroom. But he had such a deep love of education because he saw that fruitful union of faith and reason can transform people. And we've seen that.
You know, we were again all here yesterday for Pope Benedict XVI's funeral. What stood out to each one of you? What struck you about yesterday's funeral mass?
I got choked up as soon as I saw the coffin come out, but the beauty, and I think the liturgy was a beautiful liturgy, that it meant so much, because liturgy to him was essential to life. It affects every facet of our life. And what we had yesterday, from the beautiful use of Latin and then the beautiful singing and everything, but then the whole uniqueness of this situation, in some ways it felt like an end of an era, because this whole thing sort of like through the council with John Paul and then Benedict, there was like a chapter that was closing. And then when those men picked up that coffin and raised it up and started carrying it in, you get that sorrowful bell ringing at St. Peter's. It just reminded me, I was here for John Paul I's funeral as well, and JP too, and I'm tired of papal funerals, but there was always something very poignant, because, you know, sic transit gloria mundi, you know, sort of the glory, here you're the Pope, but in the end, we all die and we all come face to face with Jesus Christ. And so the idea that we could be there and pray for him, you think of the responsibility and all the things that he had to deal with during his pontificate with such courage and gentleness and fidelity. But he was a man of the church, and he was a man deeply in love with Jesus Christ, as you could see in his final words. You know,
Lord, I love you.
Lord, I love thee.
Right.
Yeah, beautiful.
Well, I think that, you know, these big events have enduring images. We talked about yesterday the gospel book closing on John Paul's casket in 2005. I think the enduring image is Pope Francis reverencing and caressing and blessing the casket, because that's an image that's never been seen. It's never happened before, I don't think. It's really never been recorded before in a video form. And that image is the one that will remain, that captures the uniqueness of yesterday's moment. And I think, as I said yesterday, it's an image of apostolic succession. We know what it is, and we have different images of it, you know, an ordination of one, you know, bishop ordaining another one. But that was a powerful image to me that will remain.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would second what Father Raymond said about the reverencing of the casket by the successor to Pope Benedict XVI. But there's also, and this is something that is always a part of any major event, in particular papal funerals and canonizations, but those who have come to attend. We had, I think, by estimates, 60 to 70,000 pilgrims who came to the city to participate. That meant that they came from all parts of Europe, but also from around the world, on a moment's notice, basically, because we got here in a hurry.
Right.
And that means, too, that that's an investment of time, of money, to come here to say farewell to Pope Benedict. So the signs, two signs really will stay with me. The first is Danke, Papst Benedict, the Germans who were here in force, as one would imagine. But then also the signs that you saw in a few places, Santo Subito. We have talked all week about whether Benedict XVI will eventually end up a doctor of the Church. The first key step to that is canonization. I'm not saying that he was a saint, I'm not saying that he was but what I am saying is that there is a recognition in Benedict XVI of goodness, that he was a holy man. And I think that's something that is forgotten in so many of the discussions. Dr. O'Donnell, you talked about that this is a gentle person, that he was a kind person. He was also a deep, deep, prayerful person.
Again, as we've been discussing, that powerful moment when Pope Francis, you know, blessed the casket, and then Pope Benedict's remains were brought into St. Peter's Basilica and down into the crypt. And it was a significant tomb he was put into as well. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so the remains were taken from the square down into the Vatican grottos, and they were placed in what had been the spot occupied by John Paul II before. With his canonization, he was raised to the floor of the basilica itself. Prior to that, you had John the 23rd. Nearby, you have the tomb of Pope St. Paul VI, who elevated Joseph Ratzinger out of relative obscurity outside of academic circles to the position of the Archbishop of Munich and Freising, and made him a cardinal.
And again, we'll have more on that a little bit later in the program for our viewers to see that as well, because it is so significant. Dr. O'Donnell, you're a theologian. What do you think Pope Benedict's legacy will be as a theologian himself?
Oh my gosh, I think it's very likely he will be a doctor of the church, which means that there was a richness to his teaching that transcends limitations of time. And I think it's so much that he left behind us. I mean, he was a professor for many, many years. And even when he left and went to Regensburg, continued very fruitful till he was called to a higher level of service in the church. But I think his love of truth, cooperators with truth, this was his motto. But he was a real pope who saw very clearly that living the truth in love was what you had to do. And I think he did that as a professor. You could really see that he had a love for his students and continued even after he had retired to meet with some of his graduate students and things like that. But his love for the intellectual life, because he saw that as human beings, one of the greatest gifts that God has given us is the gift of our intellect. We were given a mind and a heart to love. And the fusion of those two, I think when you read Pope Benedict, like his great little trilogy he did on Jesus of Nazareth, you read, when you read that, you just, like Fulton Sheen used to say, a lot of theological books, you cut the page and ink comes out. When you read Pope Benedict, blood comes out. I mean, he was very passionate about what he was writing, because he was writing about what was true and what was good and what was beautiful. And beauty was a big part of his understanding of life.
John Paul wanted to, at first, appoint him to become prefect for Catholic education, the congregation here. And then he declined, but then accepted to be head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith.
Yeah.
What has been his impact on you as a professor, but also what is his long-term impact on Catholic education as a president of a Catholic university?
Well, he left us an incredibly rich pontificate and also a writing legacy. But I remember as a theologian, one of the big things is that when he was a cardinal serving in the Sacred Congregation as head there, when he issued that document, Dominus Jesus, which talked about the uniqueness and the primacy of Jesus Christ, that apart from Jesus Christ, there is no access to the Father, that he is the way, the truth, and the life. And this was at a time where I think there was a sort of a false ecumenism, where a lot of times, it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you're sincere, and there's a type of syncretism that, well, all religions are just a path up the same mountain. And he really said, that is not true. Christ is truth, and without him, there's nothing. That had a huge impact, and so we've assigned that. We've used that document regularly in our curriculum at the college as well. That was just one little thing.
That's so beautiful. And then there's a connection between Pope Benedict and the chapel at Christendom. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, we actually cut a big block of Virginia marble and we dragged it all the way over to Rome. And at a papal audience, he knew that we knew this ahead of time. And so these two big Italian guys held up the marble and he came down. We showed him the new chapel we're building, and he blessed the cornerstone, which we're going to be installing very soon this April. And I think EWTN is going to be covering that as well. But we had carved on the stone, a sort of a Latin inscription where I am the rock that was blessed by the rock, written in Latin. Okay. So the stone will speak. So it'll be a lasting legacy of Pope Benedict, and we hope to have a little part in our sacristy, especially dedicated to his memory because of his blessing there.
Beautiful.
So you brought marble from Virginia to
Brought
Italy.
marble from Virginia. And as a matter of fact, United
like
made us pay extra for that. But when we got to fly back, the Italians
They're
said, the Pope blessed this? No charge,
Well,
no
very
problem at
good.
all. So,
Well, there's that expression about taking coals to Newcastle. Maybe bringing marble to Italy.
marble
Okay.
to Rome, yes.
Well, Dr. O'Donnell, thank you for joining us
Oh,
this
thank you so much,
week
Catherine.
and for your reflections. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my husband's a proud alum of Christendom and is so grateful for your leadership.
Praise God. It's a joy to be with you all. God
Thank
bless
you for
you.
coming.